Hello folks and welcome back to my channel. The last couple of months we talked a lot about post-top surgery nipple piercings. I actually made a really in-depth video all about what to consider for getting nipple grafts pierced post-top surgery and also other forms of surgical alteration from masculinizing top surgery. I've made some videos about my own personal goals for my nipples after top surgery and even one about some of the unrealistic expectations some people have for surgical results in their bodies. And whenever I discuss the topic of nipple piercings after top surgery, the big takeaway that I want people to have is that there's no guarantee of being able to be pierced after top surgery. There's just so much is done to the nipples and so much can affect them, particularly when we're talking about grafts, that I would say only about 50% of post-top surgery nipples are viable to be re-pierced. The other 50% either don't have enough protrusion, don't have enough blood flow, there's too much scar tissue, and it's just not safe for us to pierce through them. Now, every time I have this discussion, my comments are always filled with, but Lynn, what if I decide to do a surface piercing there instead? Could we do a surface bar under my nipple graft? Could we do some dermal anchors? Like, what about surface work after top surgery? And people ask this both for piercing nipples after top surgery, but also ask if they go full flat and no nipple, is it possible for them to get surface work after surgery? And the answer might not be one that you like. So surface piercings in general are long-term temporary. This means that they do not last forever. They will eventually migrate out of your body. That being said, many folks don't mind having a piercing that would be temporary, and a good run with surface piercings in healthy, unsurgically altered tissue is usually anywhere from 1 to 5 years. I've had surface anchors and bars done on my forehead and around my eyes. My longest lasting one lasted close to 7 years in my forehead, maybe even 8. And my shortest ones lasted me only a couple of months. Now, fortunately, all of the times I've done that, I haven't had too severe of scarring, and any scarring I did have was easy to treat topically with over-the-counter medications, and I've usually had access to a dermatologist to get professional level scar treatment done. Now, when we talk about doing surface work through surgically altered tissue, that's a little bit of a different beast. So let's say you do have grafted nipples. That area is mostly scar tissue, and there is a major change in blood flow, in the makeup of the skin and the tissue, and collagen content. All of those things make it a lot harder for a surface piercing to be stable and last in that placement. And surface piercings, even when they're done perfectly and last for a very long time, are notorious for leaving relatively severe scars. And these can either be large, wide, raised, or flat scars that can be very discolored and just be a lot of scarring in the area, to pockets on the skin. So I had surface anchors under my eyes for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years. And when I started testosterone, they did begin to migrate and reject due to the changes in my skin from being on T. This side, a little pocket, a little part of the pocket where the anchor sat, just never fully closed. So I get reoccurring acne and pimples in that pocket as it gets built up with dead skin cells, dirt and oil, makeup, face care products. And I have to go in and kind of like pop and drain that pocket regularly. I'm probably going to eventually re-pierce the area, or maybe even see a plastic surgeon or a modification artist to remove that little residual pocket that's left. But that is not an uncommon outcome from getting surface work. And I do know people who've had surface work done before on their chest who develop the same thing. So the risk, if we do these piercings after top surgery on grafted nipples or just surgically altered nipples in general, is it might not last very long. Some people, again, might only even have the piercings for a few months before they begin to reject and migrate and have to come out. And it may potentially leave pretty serious scars. And those might just be scars that visually aren't appealing. And a lot of folks who've had top surgery, like especially with nipple grafts, it's already covered in scar tissue. So like really what's a little bit more scar tissue, like truly no big deal. I, for one, do not really care about having scars on my body, but if it leaves the type of pocketed scar where it can get built up with dirt and oil and dead skin cells, that can cause reoccurring cysts or acne. It could even, in its most serious, become an abscess, and that could be potentially damaging to your nipple graft or to your results after top surgery. So that is a pretty high risk. The other thing is not everyone wants to spend all of the money to get a piercing done, and like surface work really has to be done with implant grade materials. That way it's safe to leave in for medical imaging. So it's more expensive. It's, a lot of work to heal and care for, only to not have it potentially as soon as 5 or 6 months and have it fail, and then be left with more severe scarring, and scarring that could even cause skin problems and issues. So I would be very hesitant to ever do any kind of surface work on or around post-top surgery nipples. I hesitate to say never because I am a big believer in informed consent. So if the right client came to me who had a lot of piercing experience and was very informed about all of the risks that we were taking, very understanding that this could have a serious, potentially life-altering change on their top surgery results, and understood all that and still really wanted to try it, you might be able to talk me into it, but it would come with a lot of caveat and a lot of warning about the harm and the trouble it could cause. Now, without grafts, it's not quite as dangerous or risky. It is still, full flat no nipple. It is still very likely to reject or migrate pretty quickly. It's still very likely to leave you with potentially severe scarring. You could still develop that kind of like pocketed scar that can become an issue with acne and cysts. But because there's no like grafted tissue there, like when I think about doing a surface bar on a grafted nipple, the first thought in my mind is like, oh God, what if this causes the graft to reject? Like what if this piercing goes so poorly that this whole nipple falls off? And I have seen grafts reject before from improperly done piercings, so I know that that is something that can happen, and it stresses me out. So without nipple grafts, I'm not that worried because there's no graft for me to worry about rejecting, but I am still really worried about permanent scarring and also the scarring potentially making someone feel dysphoric. Like we can't control how something's gonna scar. So I've had clients who've asked about doing surface anchors where nipples would have been on their chest after top surgery. And it's like, okay, I can do these anchors, but what if they only last you like 6 or 7 months? And what if one barely leaves a scar and the other leaves a really big scar? And now you have these asymmetric nipple scars on your chest, and that makes you feel like kind of dysphoric. Like, let's talk about if this goes the wrong way, will that make your dysphoria worse? Will that eliminate some of the benefit that you've gotten from having top surgery? Like, is this truly a risk that you're comfortable with? And that's the type of stuff that makes me really nervous and really hesitant to do anything like this after top surgery and on surgically altered tissue. And in general, chests are not like the most ideal place for surface work. I wore an anchor in the center of my chest for about 5 years. I had a really good run with it. I did enjoy it, but seatbelts sucked. It was like a nightmare. It was so impossible with seatbelts. They would get caught and snagged on it all the time. And that was in the center of my chest. I can't imagine if I had surface work on the sides, how miserable that would be with seatbelts. Crossbody bags were just not a thing I could wear at all anymore. Again, they would just catch and snag on the anchor way, way too often. Necklaces, I had to be really mindful about what length necklace, because if it was too long, not necessarily while it's like at rest, but as I'm like moving around and living my life, I could snag the necklace on the anchors, very uncomfortable. Long hair, I would get my hair tangled in the anchor all of the time. So there was a lot of hassle that came along with it. And while I did enjoy wearing it for 5 years and it left me with a little scar, one that I'm not super concerned about, it was definitely a lot. And it was a lot of impact on my day-to-day life and how I lived and how I did things. And I certainly don't think I was adequately warned or prepared for all of that when I opted to get it. I kind of found it out along the way as I was dealing with all of those things. And with surgically altered tissue, even, again, fully smooth, no nipples, there's still kind of reduced blood flow. There's a lot of scar tissue there. So it's definitely higher risk. If this is something that you've been considering post-top surgery, I would say just do a lot of reading and research and make sure you find a piercer who's really experienced with surface work and go into it understanding that there's a very good likelihood you could potentially have this piercing for less than a year, and make sure that you are at peace with having to give up the piercing somewhat soon. Make sure you're okay with the financial investment, even if it doesn't work out in the long term, and really ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I do this surface piercing? And would that outcome make my dysphoria worse? Or would that permanent change to my top surgery results, have a really big mental and emotional impact on me? And if you are fine and comfy with all of those things and down to take the risk, hell yeah, I can envision some piercing setups that would look super cool and super rad on post-op surgery anatomy. I can think of some really incredible concepts, but you just have to understand how high risk it would be, and make sure you're comfortable with that and all of the side effects. Also, me personally, kind of getting into a little bit of that social media discussion we had on my page last month, I do think there's a certain level of responsibility if you did choose to do something experimental like this, not to go online and make it seem like this is a totally safe, totally standard piercing that anyone can get done, that there's hardly any risk associated with it, and just look at how cool my fun, funky, like surface bar nipples are. I think if you do opt to get something like this done, you owe it to the community to be honest about how high risk this is, and make sure that anyone who considers emulating you is doing so with informed consent. So as much as I wish I could say surface piercings are this like perfect alternative to get nipples that you like the look of, or like a cool effect of nipples after top surgery, it's really not. It's really high risk, and you're probably not going to have it longer than a few years anyway. So it's definitely something to really put a lot of thought into before you get pierced. All that being said, again, I've had a ton of surface work on my face. I will be redoing my forehead. I'll probably be redoing my under eye anchors. I've dealt with some of the really bad scarring effects, like the pocketed scars on my face from it. And it's not a deterrent to me. I love surface piercing. I love how silly and fun it is. I'm totally okay with piercings that don't last me for forever. And I would totally do something dumb like this. Hell, depending on how I heal after top surgery, and how I feel once I tattoo my chest, I might do something dumb like this just for shits and giggles. So, we support bodily autonomy on this page. Do what you want to do. Just do it with informed consent and really, really, really think through the risks. I would hate to see anyone opt to get these piercings and end up more dysphoric afterwards than they were without, and kind of undo a lot of the benefit of their top surgery. So please be smart and please be careful with what you choose to do. All right, folks, thanks so much for hanging out, and I can't wait to sit down and chat with you again soon. Bye.